It's common for parents to get scared when something happened to their kids, like they fall down or get into an accident, but having been kidnapped by a cartel is daunting without a doubt. Most people, because of the trauma, turn to legal authorities, but not these parents, who took matters into their own hands, looked the cartel members in the eyes, and avenged the kidnappings of their children. Brace yourself, because these true stories are going to blow up your mind. Number 5. Manuel Torres Felix. To start off, we have a crime kingpin, known as El M1. In the streets, Manuel Fidele Torres Felix, who belonged to the Sinaloa cartel and was a notorious Mexican drug lord. Everything was going as usual for El M1 before the Beltran Leyva cartel killed his son. Torres Felix became a completely changed person after that. He was brutal, he was unforgiving, and he spared no one. El M1 joined the Sinaloa cartel in the 1990s and rose through the ranks to become one of the most influential leaders in the cartel. Manuel took control of the cartel after his brother Javier Torres Felix was arrested by the authorities in 2004. After Manuel took over the reins of the Sinaloa cartel, he worked closely with two people, Ismael Zambada Garcia and Ovidio Guzman Lopez. Ismael Zambada Garcia was his guide, while Ovidio Guzman Lopez, who was the son of El Chapo Guzman, was his business partner. El M1 was responsible for monitoring the drug shipments from South America into Mexico. But now let's talk about the Beltran Leyva organization, also named BLO, that killed Manuel Felix's son. BLO and the Sinaloa cartel were allies before Manuel's reign, and both cartels operated from the Sinaloa region of Mexico. However, BLO and the Sinaloa cartel became fierce rivals in 2008 when the alliance was broken. The rivalry became intense with time, and what unfolded next changed El M1 forever. The fight for dominance between the Beltran Leyva organization and the Sinaloa cartel took a bloody turn when Manuel's 20-year-old son was brutally killed by the BLO gunmen outside the health ministry in the Montebello residential district of Culiacan. El M1's daughter and sister-in-law were injured in the incident that happened in April 2018. The guy went crazy after his son's death. Manuel Felix ordered his men to abduct as many members of the BLO as possible and to bring them to his ranch. What followed was a nightmare for the BLO members and showed the true psychotic nature of El M1. Each of the Leyva cartel men were subjected to unimaginable torture before being put to death. One of these men was Roberto Carlos Barcelo Villagran, a municipal police commander who was passed to the worst of tortures. His back was sliced to ribbons with knives and his legs were cut off. Everything while he was still alive. But El M1 did not put an end to his misery by shooting him. Rather, he was beheaded. His body was dumped in the trunk of a car, while Manuel's men dumped the bodies of other BLO members all around Culiacan. Even after killing dozens of BLO men, El M1's thirst for revenge didn't stop. He became more aggressive and brutal, even showing signs of emotional instability. And this is why he was given the nickname El Ondeado, which means the crazy one. He sure was a crazy man, but at the same time, he was very intelligent. The war between the BLO and the Sinaloa cartel had become uncontrollable, and there was violence everywhere in Sinaloa. El M1 was well aware that the BLO wanted to kill him in any way possible, so he never left his hometown. Even the BLO sicarios that he killed were brought to his personal ranch. Although he was managing the affairs of the Sinaloa cartel with the help of El Mayo, the city of Culiacan was filled with blood and violence. There were tens of new dead bodies on the streets every single day. It was a scene from a horror movie. The situation was so bad that the Mexican government had to deploy 2,000 troops to the city to bring things back to normal. And this was the end of Manuel Torres Felix. On October 13, 2012, El M1 was killed in a gun battle with the authorities, putting an end to his reign of terror. Number 4. Gary Plush. Next on our list is Gary Plush. Felix was a drug lord and a known personality. However, the next person on our list was an ordinary man who took matters into his own hands after his son was kidnapped. The date is March 16. The year is 1984. A man can be seen anxiously waiting in the airport, but he's not there to welcome his family or friends. What he's about to do is going to shock everyone. Gary Plush was the man who was waiting for his son's kidnapper. A man named Jeff Doucette had kidnapped Gary's son, Jody, Before the kidnapping, Gary was leading an ordinary life. He had served in the US Air Force and then left the service to become an equipment salesman. Not only this, but he also dabbled in camera work for a local news stations as well. He was an average guy who was trying to make a living, but everything changed when Jody was kidnapped by Jeff Doucette. Jeff was not a random unknown man, but he used to teach karate to Jody. On February 18, 1984, Jeff offered to take Jody on a quick ride. Jody's mother, June, didn't think twice before allowing it. I mean, who could doubt a trusted man of the community who had been teaching karate to kids for some time? But the karate teacher had other intentions. Doucette took Jody to the West Coast. He also changed both his and the boy's appearance by shaving his beard and dyeing Jody's hair black. They ended up in a rundown motel in Anaheim, California, where Jody was insulted by Doucette. Any kid in his place would have been terrified by now. But Jody somehow gathered the courage and asked Doucette if he could call his parents. Surprisingly, he was allowed. Gary and June immediately called the police. Doucette was apprehended and Jody was sent back to his parents' house in Louisiana. But Gary Plush didn't let this go. He spent most of the few days at a local bar called the Cotton Club, trying to gather information on when Doucette would be brought to Baton Rouge for his trial. He met a former WBRC news colleague who told him that Doucette was scheduled to land at 9:08 a.m. Gary headed straight to the Baton Rouge airport. To hide his identity, he disguised himself in a baseball cap and sunglasses. He entered the arrivals hall and noticed that the WBRC news crew was getting ready to capture the moment when Jeff Doucette would enter the hall, surrounded by a lot of cops. The moment finally came, but the cameras were about to record something much more than just Doucette walking towards the police cars. Exactly when Doucette was passing through the hall, Gary took a gun, which was hidden in his boot, and fatally shot Doucette in the head. The news cameras were able to capture the exact moment when this incident happened. The video has been seen by more than 20 million people. The footage shows Doucette suddenly collapsing and a police officer named Barnett tackling Plush against the wall. The scene was absolutely chaotic. Barnett wasn't just a police officer, but also a good friend of Gary, so he sought an explanation for Plush's action. Gary responded with tears in his eyes. "If somebody did this to your kid, you would do the same." Gary Plush was charged with second-degree murder, but he reached a plea bargain and pleaded no contest to manslaughter. He was given a suspended sentence of 7 years, 5 years of probation, and 300 hours of community service. Gary went back to his normal life even before completing his sentencing. He died in 2014 and is survived by Jody, his son. A book titled Why Gary Why was written by Jody, in which the son remembers his father as a loyal and lively friend who always brought laughter, and a hero who found beauty in everything. Number 3. Mariam Rodriguez. Moving on to the next parent on the list, we'll now talk about a mother who wanted just one thing until the end of her days: justice. Ms. Rodriguez had a 20-year-old daughter named Karen, who was abducted and killed by a Mexican cartel. Unlike many others, this sad event put Ms. Rodriguez on a life mission to avenge her daughter's abduction and killing. She wanted to hunt down every single one of her daughter's kidnappers, and she went to great lengths to bring the culprits to justice. She completely changed her appearance, did surveillance of the homes of these cartel members, and spent her days and nights on social media to find all the leads she possibly could. She would often chase down her daughter's kidnappers barefoot with a pistol in her hand until the police arrived. But what is the complete story? Let's go to January 23, 2014, when Karen Alejandro Salinas Rodriguez was abducted. She was driving through San Fernando when she was stopped by 2 trucks filled with armed men. A few of these men entered Karen's car and quickly drove away with her. At the time, Mariam Rodriguez, along with her family, desperately tried to track down Karen the following few weeks. It was soon discovered that the notorious Zetas cartel had kidnapped Mariam's daughter. This was one of those cartels who were famous for their ruthless kidnappings to fund their illegal operations. Karen's family received ransom demands from the cartel, which they paid, but Karen didn't return home. However, there was no other option left for Mariam Rodriguez but to take matters into her own hands. One of the first moves she made in her quest for revenge was proposing a meeting with the cartel members. One member of the Zetas cartel agreed to meet her, but according to him, he didn't know where exactly Karen was being kept. The member offered Ms. Rodriguez to assist in the search for her daughter if she paid her $2,000. Although Mariam Rodriguez paid for the fee, unfortunately, the search led to a dead end. But she got her hands on one important clue: the name of the cartel member who was behind Karen's abduction. The man from the cartel was called Sama, By this point, she already believed that her daughter had been killed, but she vowed that she would bring her killers to justice. Mariam started by gathering information on Sama. She found his Facebook account and was able to identify one of his friends in a picture on social media who was wearing the uniform of a famous ice cream shop. Her next stop was the ice cream shop. She waited outside the shop for hours before Sama finally showed up. Ms. Rodriguez then carefully trailed Sama to discover the place of his residence, but she needed more than just Sama's location, so she dyed her hair red and engaged with one of Sama's neighbors pretending she was doing a poll. The authorities hadn't been helpful to Ms. Rodriguez until she found an ally in the federal police who agreed to help her. Later, the police commander stated the following reason for helping Ms. Rodriguez. When she pulled her files onto the table, I had never seen anything like it. The details and information gathered by this woman, working all alone, were incredible. Sama managed to evade arrest initially, but was finally apprehended and gave away the names of other cartel members who shed light on Karen's abduction. One of these members took the police to the ranch where they had killed Karen. Ms. Rodriguez had found some clues while at the ranch: her daughter's scarf, a cushion from her car, and her femur bone. This fueled Mariam's determination to find each one of her daughter's killers. Through her relentless efforts, she tracked down 10 members of the Zetas cartel who had abducted her daughter. Throughout her mission, she knew she was traveling through a dangerous road, but it didn't stop her from bringing Karen's abductors to justice. She was fearless, as seen by one of her statements. "I don't care if they kill me. I died the day they killed my daughter. I want the end of this. I'm going to take out the people who hurt my daughter, and they can do whatever they want to me." Tragically, her words were to come true. In March 17, 29 inmates dug a tunnel and escaped from a prison in Ciudad Victoria. Karen's abductors were also kept in the same prison. Mariam knew her life was in danger, so she requested police protection. The police agreed to provide patrols for her, but danger caught up with Ms. Rodriguez 2 months later, on the same day when Mexico celebrates Mother's Day. Mariam was hobbling up to her front door on crutches when a white Nissan, driven by the escaped inmates, pulled up in front of her house, and dozens of bullets were fired at Ms. Rodriguez. The killing of Mariam Rodriguez resulted in statewide protest. The police managed to apprehend only 2 of her culprits, and one was killed in a gunfire. The rest of them remained at large. Number 2. Eduardo Gallo. The next parent on our list who refused to let go of his daughter's abduction and killing is Eduardo Gallo. It was July 2000, and Eduardo's daughter, Paola Gallo, was having a party with her friends at her parents' weekend home. Suddenly, the house was recklessly stormed by a group of armed men. These men jumped over the fence and burst into the house. The people inside the house were terrorized for 2 hours before leaving. They did not leave with just jewelry and cash, but took Paola with them too. This was not an unusual event in Tepito alone in Mexico, because the city was plagued with abduction and murder incidents at the time. Just like most of the abductions during those days, Gallo was asked to pay around $18,500 for her daughter's release. He knew what would happen if he didn't meet the abductors' demands, so he paid the ransom, along with some jewelry to the cartel members. But despite meeting all the demands, Paola was killed, and her dead body was discovered. She had been shot twice, once in the back and once in the neck. Eduardo, like any other father in his place, couldn't stop his tears at his daughter's funeral. While expressing his love for his beloved daughter, Eduardo said, "Thank you for your smile and caresses. Thank you for your songs, your happiness, and your love of life. You always lit the path so I could distinguish between justice and vengeance." Gallo was going through immense pain from the thoughts of the suffering her daughter must have gone through in her final moments. He wanted the killers of his daughter brought to justice in no time. Although 3 suspects were quickly apprehended by the police, the actual person who had killed Gallo's daughter was still at large. Gallo desperately wanted to bring his daughter's killers to justice, so he closed down his consulting firm and focused all his energies on finding the main culprit. He became a relentless detective who, over the course of the next year, gathered clues and followed leads on the streets. While doing his research, he stumbled upon the shocking fact that 90% of abductions in Mexico go unreported. The reason is quite obvious. Families of victims feared that reporting the incident to authorities would put the lives of the ones they love in danger. But Eduardo Gallo had nothing to lose anymore, because he already lost his daughter. He wanted to avenge his daughter's kidnappers and killers, no matter the consequences. It was Gallo's unwavering determination that he was able to finally find the man who had killed Paola, but he didn't stop there, and even assisted the authorities in tracking down the shooter by tracing him to a payphone he used. After surveillance by the police, a 20-year-old man named Francisco Zamora Arellano was arrested, who eventually admitted to the crime of abducting and killing Paola Gallo. After the case was closed, José Agustín Montiel, the Morelos State Police Chief, was all praise for Eduardo Gallo. This man, with great bravery, set aside all of his affairs and carried out the entire investigation. Unfortunately, Mexico is plagued by kidnappings and murders, and this problem affects the common man and bigwigs equally, including the drug lords themselves. If you don't believe it, then the next and final story of this video will change your mind. Number 1. El Chapo. Lastly on our list is El Chapo. On August 15, 2016, two rich Mexican brothers were having dinner at a fancy restaurant on the main street of Puerto Vallarta, a popular vacation spot in Mexico. The brothers were surrounded by their friends and celebrating one of their birthdays. The party was going as any other party in Mexico, full of fun and champagne. But this all changed when six armed men with machine guns stormed the restaurant and forced the brothers to their knees. Both the brothers were disarmed, shoved in two SUVs, and driven away from the scene. The whole operation was done in less than 2 minutes and was described as violent but very clean by the restaurant owner. Are you wondering who are the two brothers that got abducted? They were Jesus Alfredo Guzman and Iván Archibaldo Guzman, the sons of the infamous drug lord El Chapo. Yes, the El Chapo. A question must be coming to your mind right now. Who in their sane brains would kidnap the sons of the man who himself is a sign of terror? Well, it was an even tougher guy who saw an opportunity and took his shot. Let's go back to January 8, 2016, when El Chapo was arrested in Los Mochis, Sinaloa, after a fierce shootout with the authorities. This was not the first time that the drug lord was being arrested. Rather, it was his third arrest, after he had escaped from prison the previous 2 times. So it was widely believed that El Chapo would be extradited to the United States this time in order to stop him from escaping the 3rd time. The kidnapping of El Chapo's sons was seen as a major setback for the drug lord and his attempts to maintain the dominance of the Sinaloa cartel in the region from prison. There was a new player in town that threatened El Chapo's power, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. It was later revealed that the abduction of El Chapo's son was to make a way for the CJNG and its leader, El Mencho. He sent a clear message to the members of the Sinaloa cartel: your king is now locked up, so don't think you're untouchable. It was also meant as a warning. El Mencho was coming for the throne. The CJNG was established by El Mencho in 2010, who quickly transformed it into one of the biggest and deadliest criminal organizations in Mexico. The Sinaloa cartel and the CJNG were allies initially, but the friendship broke following El Chapo's arrest. The CJNG started taking control of some of the Sinaloa's cartel territories. So, did El Chapo sit back after hearing the news of his sons getting kidnapped? You must have guessed right. Although behind bars, El Chapo was ready to fight, no matter how bloody it turned. But a timely intervention from El Mayo Zambada prevented the streets of Mexico from turning brutally violent. Zambada was one of the few veteran drug lords of the Sinaloa cartel who had survived the years-long drug war. The word on the street is that he intervened and took charge of the week-long negotiations with El Mencho and the CJNG. The sources at the DEA say that the initial plan of the leader of the CJNG included the kidnapping and killing of the El Chapo's sons. However, El Mencho changed his mind at the 11th hour, following El Chapo's threats of a bloody war and El Mayo Zambada's relentless bargaining. Both Jesus Alfredo Guzman and Iván Archibaldo Guzman were released by the CJNG cartel, but not before getting something in return. It took El Chapo a $2 million ransom and a whole lot of drugs to get his sons back home safely. Now imagine if El Mayo Zambada hadn't stepped in to defuse the situation in time. The streets of Mexico would have been filled with the blood of many innocent lives. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, please give it a like and consider subscribing. It really helps us a lot to keep giving you quality content just as this.